in 314 for a shooting at Century Theaters. They're saying somebody's shooting in the auditorium.
Roger, keep your fires west of the smoke. You're cleared hot. An officer hit. Send me the world.
Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again.
Welcome to Tactical Tangents.
Welcome back to Tactical Tangents. This is Mike. This episode is brought to you by Loa Boots. Start your day off on the right foot with footwear that was designed for those who stand relentlessly in the face of adversity. I wear Loa every single day, for miles on canine searches and for hours on tactical operations in inclement weather. No matter what, Loa keeps me moving. Whether you run, hike, hunt, or fight, on the streets or out in the woods, Loa has the gear you need to help you conquer whatever challenges you face. Go check out their new line of trail running shoes at Loa Boots, L-O-W-A Boots.com, and get outside for some fresh air and daylight. Loa, for those who know where they're going and won't stop until they get there.
And this is Jim. This episode is also brought to you by ManusX. We've talked a lot about the tactical fantasy on this podcast, and one of the quickest ways to break your tactical fantasies and actually improve your performance is by getting real feedback. One of the ways you can do that is with ManusX. You're not going to get better at shooting on your own. You need practice, data, and coaching. And you need to make the most of your ammo with good live and dry fire training. Manus is a family of training devices that tracks you while you train. It times and tracks everything you do in a drill and coaches you as you go. It is indispensable to taking your shooting to the next level. Go find them on manusx.com. Mike, how are you now?
I'm here thinking about aliens and spaceships and stuff, apparently.
Aliens and spaceships. Yep. Well, you live over by Roswell, right?
The truth is out there. And most of our listeners are probably not going to catch that reference, but
probably too young to get it. Yep.
I need to do some X-Files like intro theme music here, maybe in the background.
Oh, I like that. UFOs aren't cool anymore. Like the government came out and said, yeah, there's aliens, and so everyone just kind of moved on.
It was the mystery that everyone was.
Theory.
Yeah, people were really caught up in the fantasy side of it. Now that it's not a fantasy, it's like, oh no, we really are doing all kinds of weird things. Perfect.
Yeah. So I didn't, when I got with you to make a podcast, it never occurred to me that we would probably be talking about aliens and UFOs and stuff, but here we are. And one of the reasons we're here is, being in the Air Force, I get asked more than I would have expected about aliens and UFOs and Area 51 and all that stuff. So I figured, it's time to talk about it. Now, Mike and I, as a matter of principle, we don't like to dwell on the things we can't tell you about because of whatever professional obligations, classified, whatever. That's not our jam. Because we don't think that makes for a very good podcast. And it kind of focuses on the wrong thing, like what I can't tell you versus all the things that really I can tell you, right? The fact is, although there are some sensitivities, there's a lot that we can talk about. And frankly, we probably should talk about. I just have to caveat, anytime we get anything close to that, I don't speak for my employer. Mike doesn't speak for his. And we are being very, very sensitive about our obligations, right? Nobody needs to know the recipe to the secret sauce, and that's okay. But we can talk about UFOs. So maybe we should. And apparently the term of art these days is, instead of UFO, that's what I grew up with, flying saucers, whatever. The official term is UAP, Unexplained Aerial Phenomenon, which is probably, it's probably more accurate. It's just not as fun to say. So I'm going to call UFO, right? So I think the overriding question that some of our listeners may have is, are UFOs real? And the short answer is yes, they are actually real. And not even like the, any flying object that you can't identify is a UFO.
Well, actually,
once you've identified it, then it's just an FO. Or once it's on the ground, then it's just an O. Even that play on words stuff. Now this goes past that, right? And not even the people think that they're aliens, but it's actually some top secret government conspiracy to use chemtrails to turn the frogs gay or whatever it is, conspiracy theory stuff. This is actually, frankly, beyond that, if we're being honest. what I mean when I say, UFOs are real is that people, often trained observers, relatively savvy people who have aviation training, who are in the military, who have clearances, who look at radar scopes for a living, those people in airplanes, people on ships, people on the ground are seeing things and have seen things for quite some time, and are sometimes seeing those things corroborated through pretty advanced sensors, things like radars and infrared cameras, that kind of thing. So when I tell you, there are UFOs, I mean it. There really are unidentified aerial phenomenon. And it's weird and it's interesting, and maybe it has some tactical implications. In fact, I kind of know it does.
So does this mean that you've seen alien spacecraft, or?
I can neither confirm nor deny, but I will say that, no shit, I've seen some stuff. I've seen stuff up in the sky where I'm like, I don't know what the hell that is. And I've seen stuff down low where I'm like, I don't know what the hell that stuff is. And as far as this is a thing, both the Department of Defense and the U.S. intelligence community, the community as a group, was directed by Congress, hey, go check this out, and they did. And they convened a task force. That's how you know we're serious. We got a task force, the UAP task force. And they published some reports, some on the unclassified side, some through government channels, on this UAP, this unexplained aerial phenomenon. And, you can Google it. We'll link to it in the show notes, kind of the report stuff. It's kind of inconclusive. It doesn't say, yes, aliens, or yes, it's the Russians or the Chinese or whatever. So the origin of some of these objects isn't clear, but they do kind of confirm that people, and like I said, even military pilots or military ship crews, are seeing, and they keep seeing, aerial objects that are concerning, legit, hey, we need to check this stuff out, concerning.
WTF.
And potentially a hazard to safety. Some of these objects are coming close enough that the planes are trying to maneuver to avoid them. And that's a little scary when you're flying around. You're like, ooh, a ball of light. Ooh, that ball of light looks like it's going to hit my airplane. I need to do something. Maybe it's sunlight reflecting off your canopy and it's just confusing you. People have been seeing things since forever. Foo Fighters. The term Foo Fighter was what guys were seeing in World War II back in the day. But
now
yeah. So getting ready for this episode, I took a look through what we do say public, they, the government, the feds, say publicly about this officially. So I looked through the intelligence community report back in 2021. They published a report. It's a little dense. It's written in governmentese, but I'll kind of give you the highlights from the executive summary. It says there's a limited amount of high-quality reporting on these phenomenon, and that hampers our ability to make any firm conclusions. Right? Lots of people see stuff, they're like, yeah, I saw some lights. And, I'm adding my own, editorial in here to their words, but the lack of high-quality reporting is kind of screwing them, right? The task force considered a range of information from the military and the IC, the intelligence community reporting, but because it lacked sufficient specificity, and there wasn't a reporting process, there isn't a form you fill out when you see one of these things and you submit it up, that it's hard to track data. It's hard to get anything meaningful out of it, right? So as a result of that lack of high quality data, the task force concentrated on reports in a certain window from 2004 to 2021. And mostly what they said was they need a better process for reporting. Hey, if we're going to get real about this, we should probably make a form, which you'd think the military would be better at. And most of the reporting probably do represent physical objects, as in not just, light shining through your canopy or a shadow in your sensor, that kind of thing. Probably physical objects, given the majority of these things were registered across multiple sensors. Like I said, radar sees it, infrared sees it, electro-optical cameras see it, weapon seeker heads are seeing it, in addition to the eyeballs. Okay? In a limited number of incidents, these phenomena reportedly appeared to show unusual flight characteristics. They were flying in ways airplanes don't fly. Go way up high, shoot down way down low, go sometimes into the water, pop out of the water. That's weird. That's not a thing airplanes typically do.
Get one of those.
Yeah. And these could be the result of like sensor errors or spoofing. And you see this sometimes like if you ever check out like flight trackers, like the airspace will close over a country and you see like one plane flying across it like Leroy Jenkins. Well, almost never is a plane actually tooling across the airspace. What it is GPS jamming and spoofing shows that plane in a place where it really isn't. So maybe it's something like that, right? Okay, cool. Could be observer misperception, like, hey, you thought you saw something, but it wasn't what your brain's not telling you what you're actually seeing. Okay, cool. Needs additional
perception thing.
Additional analysis. And it says there are probably multiple types of unexplained phenomena requiring different explanations, and it's probably not one thing. Okay, cool. And that's based on the range of different appearances, different behaviors, and their analysis of the data supports that idea that this probably doesn't fall into one category. It probably falls into like 5. It could be airborne clutter, just like things in the air. Could be natural atmospheric phenomena, lightning, ball lightning, that kind of thing, or dust clouds reflecting back off the radar. Okay, cool. It could be U.S. government or U.S. industry developmental programs, advanced programs.
Quotey fingers.
Yeah. Could be foreign adversary systems. The Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, who knows, whoever else we count as adversaries flying around.
Like a big weather balloon, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Hypothetically.
And then, a fifth category, like other. The other is kind of the funny one. Like, okay, well, fuck it. Maybe it's aliens. I don't know. So that's kind of what this report kind of says, is maybe we need some categories, and they all probably fit in those categories, but they're probably not just one thing. It's probably not just like one advanced program that we're not read into. It's probably some other stuff. Okay, cool. One thing that says very clearly is these unexplained phenomenon clearly pose a safety of flight issue. And that's where it's like no joke. Like, hey, these things are dangerous, potentially very dangerous to other airplanes, airliners, that kind of thing. And may pose a challenge to U.S. national security. We're not ready to say we're scared of it, but we are ready to say we need to look at it. Okay? Safety concerns primarily center on aviators contending with a cluttered air domain. As in, there's stuff you could run into. That's a problem. And it would also represent a national security challenge if they are a foreign adversary collection platform.
Challenge.
Right?
I like that word.
Yeah. If it's the Chinese spying on us with this weird, flying orb thing, then we should care about that. Okay, cool. Got it. And that probably means that adversary has a breakthrough or disruptive technology. They've got some, sort of like when we developed the stealth bomber, that was a breakthrough, right? That changed the game between us and everybody else, that we had a stealth bomber. This would be like that. Right, where the chessboard pops out underneath us, and that would be a national security challenge, according to the IC. Okay, thanks, guys. Thanks, bros. Okay, so it goes on. Consistent consolidation of reports from across the government, standardized reporting, and increased collection is important. That's what's going to allow us to kind of get to the bottom of it, which I agree with, but it sounds kind of bureaucratic, like, we need a form. Well, we do.
Yeah, there's idea and then there's execution.
Yeah.
And it's all in the execution on something like that.
And one of the things it talks about is honestly like there's a stigma, right? So you're a F-18 pilot flying over the Pacific. You see this weird thing flying around.
And you report a UFO and they're like, okay, bud.
Yeah. And then you get a new call sign out of there, like, oh, fucking Mulder or some shit. Like,
Mulder and Scully.
Yeah. Or your Scully. And then like, so there are incentives not to report. And then like, even if you do report, who do you tell? You tell the intel guy? What's he going to do with it? Right. And so that's one of the problems is we do think there's stuff out there. We don't think we're figuring it out. And we think one of the reasons is guys are afraid to fess up when they see this stuff. And that's pretty silly. Right. So I thought that was interesting, right? That's the official like government party line. That's what's out there. So it's real and it's serious and that's official. Like, yeah, there's UFOs and we think they're dangerous and maybe a problem. And the fact that we don't even know how to talk about them is maybe a problem. Okay, cool. So that might affect us as tacticians and practitioners. Cool. As it relates to me personally, I have been flying airplanes now since like 1994, before many of our listeners were born. That's like 30 years roughly of off and on flying airplanes. I have flown all over the world, sometimes in combat zones, in many different airframes, often with a variety of sensors ranging from my Mark I eyeball to night vision goggles, radars, sometimes very sensitive cameras, and infrared gimbaled cameras, sensor balls, that kind of thing. I have also been involved with testing emerging technology for the Air Force on systems ranging from satellites to missiles to decoys. Like, those are all things I've personally worked on. And some of it is freaking cool. And some of it is spectacular.
Spectacular.
Yeah, so that means disruptive. It's disruptive technology.
I was going to say, it presents a challenge to our adversaries.
Presents a challenge to the adversaries of America, right? That's the whole point, right? We're trying to surprise them. It also means I've seen some stuff. Like, I've seen stuff we made that I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. That also means that some of the stuff I've done personally looks a lot like a UFO to folks on the ground. Like, I'm pretty sure I'm personally responsible for like half the UFO sightings in the American Southwest from 2005 to 2015.
No big whoop.
Like, yeah, like that's not a flex. Like, that just is. Like, flying a airplane down low to the ground. Sometimes I got lights on. Sometimes I got them off. Sometimes I'm dropping things out of my airplane on ranges and stuff. Like, maybe it's aliens. Maybe it's like a bundle of chem lights that we throw out the back. You never know, right? So from that experience, like as a military dude, and I don't speak for the military, and there's stuff I can't get into, but the stuff I can tell you, the stuff I would want to know as a listener, the stuff I'd want to know as a voter, as a taxpayer, the stuff I'd want to know if I were a civil aviator flying a Cessna around that shares the skies with all that weird military stuff. A couple things. First off, yeah, we do. We have some cool tech. And it needs to be tested and validated and exercised and ultimately employed against the enemies of America. That's a good thing. That's your tax dollars hard at work. And that's also kind of not what we're talking about, right? Like, we're saying even when we're doing that stuff, we're seeing things. And that might better, be, right? Yeah. And typically when the military does a test on some disruptive technology, we're not doing it over your town. We're not doing it over Los Angeles or Phoenix or, New York, right? We're specifically trying not to do that. We're trying to get as far from people as we can be, right? We're looking for some privacy. We're doing it in the confines of very controlled airspace, usually a test or a training range. It is very scheduled. It's very coordinated. And if we need to hide it, we are doing everything we can to hide it. Which means I'm probably not flying over your farm. Okay? Probably not going after your cows or ostriches. So that's thing one, as far as the advanced military tech stuff. Like, that's probably not what you're seeing. The next thing is the U.S. military sometimes does training and exercises in cities. Right in downtown big town USA, right?
True story. Ask me how I know.
Yeah, and that can look pretty crazy, right? Helicopters flying around at night and explosions and dudes jumping out of the back of the helicopters and stuff.
Yeah.
And
with Mike on the other end with a fucking paintball gun shooting Sims at these dudes. That was a good time.
and that can be pretty unsettling, right? Especially if you're not expecting it. That looks crazy. That looks like they're taking over my city, right?
Yeah, I imagine the party goers at like some downtown bars in my city. Like, what are they doing?
Nothing to be concerned with, citizen. Carry on.
Little guy.
Hang on. Yeah. The thing you need to know about that is the military isn't training to take over a U.S. city, right? We are largely red-blooded Americans, and we are very not into that sort of thing. Sorry to dash your hopes. That's not how we roll, right? In fact, every one of us raised our hand to God and sort of uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States. It specifically says we don't do that to you. Okay? And that's important. That's like a baseline thing everyone in the tactical universe needs to understand.
But Jim, conspiracies.
Yeah. I swear to you, I am as Second Amendment as you are, or maybe a little bit more. I'm on the spectrum of Second Amendment, I'm somewhere around Somalia. Okay. So I'm probably not coming for your guns.
Jim's got retirement plans somewhere in the mountains of Idaho.
We did an episode about that. We're not going that way. So, we're not planning to take over your city, right? That's not what it's about. What we must do, what the U.S. government must do, what the U.S. military must do is prepare to, we have a mandate to rescue hostages, handle terrorist attacks, and deal with weapons of mass destruction. And we got to be able to do it in any city in the world. We have to be able to do it in any city. It happens. It's much easier and cheaper and safer and much more secure for everybody to do that in a U.S. city rather than like some foreign city. Pick a foreign city. Imagine what a pain in the butt that would be, right? Like, hey, we're going to go to Mexico City and we're going to go practice, pulling hostages out of there. Like, we probably could. But
they won't mind, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure no one will watch.
Yeah. So when those events happen, I assure you they are coordinated with local authorities, the cops. Sometimes the cops get to play in them, which is kind of cool. Yeah. It's actually good for everyone, right? They're coordinated with elected officials, specifically the voters vote in officials who get briefed on this stuff. It is definitely run through the lawyers, like a lot of lawyers. And also whoever owns the property where the training event takes place. They are 100%, they know what's up. And they're set up to have as little impact on the surrounding area as possible. You might see some stuff, but it's not going to affect you, right? Again, like, that's your tax dollars at work. If, God forbid, you get taken hostage, or your kid gets taken hostage, or the president, no matter what party they're from, gets taken hostage, or some asshat plants a nuclear bomb in your city, you want the door kickers to be good at handling that. You don't want that to be like a pickup game, right? So doing realistic training in these places is really damn important. And we understand, it's disruptive, it's scary, it's controversial, but the alternatives suck. And that's also not what we're talking about with UFOs, right? A black helicopter is a black helicopter. That ain't what we're talking about.
Consider it identified. Maybe not by you.
Yeah.
But someone.
I grew up in the 90s and watching X-Files and stuff. I was like, oh God, the black helicopters. And then when I flew refueling airplanes and I refueled the black helicopters, I'm like, oh, they're not so bad. They're kind of cool. We have people on who we've had on the podcast who now fly those helicopters. So if you see a UFO, is it some top secret government project to replace your elected officials with lizards? Probably not. Not saying never. I'm saying probably not.
But maybe.
You personally, probably aren't cool enough for the government to want to replace you with a lizard. So we're probably not coming after you. If it is a test program, it probably isn't over your house. Test programs happen in test places. Almost always happen in test places. If it's the black helicopters over your house, they're probably doing some legit righteous training for some special ops dudes to be good at saving you on the worst day of your life. And that's the sound of freedom, baby. Like, it just kind of is what it is. Cheer them on, right? If they land at your local airport, bring them some barbecue. It's awesome. They love you. You love them. God bless America, right? So when you see weird stuff in the sky, what are you seeing? Well, a lot of the time, weird lights moving in weird ways in the sky are actually pretty mundane aerial objects. They're the boring stuff most of the time. Most of the time when I have a neighborhood Facebook pages because I'm interested in home security and stuff, and I see people like, oh, there's a light in the sky, it's the UFOs, and I'm like, is it though, or is it Venus? You're probably seeing Venus, right? And it's important, like when you're trying to sort this stuff out, like rule out the obvious stuff, rule out the basic stuff. So is it an airplane? And you might be like, I know what an airplane looks like. I assure you, you don't. There are lots of different ways airplanes look based on their lighting, especially at night, right? And they can really deceive your eyes. There are a lot of different lighting configurations that airplanes have as required by the FAA. And in general, planes have several different colored lights on. Most of the time, the right wing tip will always have a green light on it. Most of the time, the left wing tip will have a red light on it. The origin of that is the same as ships and to some extent cars, is the right-of-way rules, right? The plane on the right converging has the right-of-way, so it will see a green light. But when a plane turns, you might see the green light go up and the red light go down, or vice versa. And that sometimes looks like two objects dancing, and it's really just one plane. You're just seeing two lights moving. There's almost always a white light. Sometimes it'll be flashing. There's usually a rotating red light. A lot of lights. When a plane comes into land, it will tend to put a whole lot of lighting on to make it easier to see. You may see a military airplane with its afterburners lit, which looks kind of cool. Like usually there's an orange glow. Newer military planes have formation lights, the little strips that have this like eerie green slime indigo color. And it's just to help airplanes spot each other in formation and make sure they're in the right position next to each other.
Something to mark like a reference point or...
Yeah. It helps you figure out, okay, I'm in the right position relative to my buddy. Cool. Or to help find your buddy. Like, hey, we were just doing a bunch of turning. Where's my wingman? Oh, there he is. Okay, cool. Now, funny thing about airplanes, do you remember the SR-71 spy plane? Kind of cool looking, big, long, black airplane.
It's badass.
Badass. It's still one of the sexiest airplanes ever made, right? It first flew in 1964. I'm not good at math, but that's like 60 years ago. That's a long time ago. I would hope we have something out now that could beat it.
Well,
I would hope.
The F-22 and the F-35, those were developed. Those projects started, like the early 90s or something like that?
It depends on how you count, like when it started. But people were talking about the Advanced Tactical Fighter, the ATF, for the F-22 when I was a little kid. That was 35 years ago. Yeah. I remember seeing artist impressions of it. So, the SR-71 Mach 3 goes so fast that supposedly it like turns orange as it's flying because it's so hot, right? So, weird lights almost always is an airplane. Okay, cool. Hold that thought. We'll come back to figuring out whether it's an airplane. Another thing that commonly gets confused for aliens is satellites. Satellites usually look like steady lights, like they typically don't blink or flash. And they move fast in a straight line. They usually aren't like maneuvering left or right. They just go one side of the horizon to the other. Sometimes they will change how bright they are, though. They reflect light the same way the moon reflects light. The moon doesn't create its own light, right? It's the sun reflecting off it. Little science for you.
There's a line in a Linkin Park song. I can't remember how it goes exactly. Something about the sun gives the light to the moon without asking the moon if it owes it one or something like that. Like,
it's deep. I like it.
It's kind of clever. Yeah, it's kind of clever. I remember hearing that song when I was younger, and I'm like, that's kind of, like, that's interesting. That's a life philosophy quote right there.
Yeah. So satellites, like, sometimes they get brighter, sometimes they get less bright, and it's usually like sunlight, right? And whether the Earth is like blocking the sun.
The sun doesn't give the light to the moon, assuming the moon's gonna owe it one. That's the line, I think. It was gonna bug me until we figured that out.
I'm gonna get that as a tattoo now. That's happening. All right.
Hang on, let me get my guitar. I'm just kidding.
So funny thing about this brightness thing is because of how your eyes and your brain work together at night, bright lights look closer and dimmer lights look further away, right? So a bright satellite or even a bright planet might look lower than it really is. And in fact, it might look lower than a plane. And a plane with dim lighting might look much higher than it is. And it's a factor of how your eyes and your brain work. One thing that people really react to is the Starlink satellite trains. The Starlink internet satellites move in like strings of like 20 little dots spinning across the sky. And the first time you see it, you're like, what the hell is that?
Those legit look fucking cool.
They're cool as hell.
Almost as cool as the SpaceX launches.
Oh, yeah.
Those look fucking cool.
They do. So Starlink satellites, they look like a little string of lights flying across the sky, moving in a line. But interesting thing, they are not the only satellites that move in formation. You can Google satellite formations and see some other ones. They're kind of cool, like legit neat science. Like they'll move in like a triangle of satellites flying across the sky. You mentioned the SpaceX satellite or rocket launches. Most rocket launches in the U.S. are from Florida or the central coast of California, but it turns out there are actually several places around the country where we do space launches. And they look cool as hell, right? You see parts of the rocket exhaust, you see parts of the rocket. Like, if you're ever not sure and you think it might be, just Google, hey, is there a space launch? And all the nerds will come out and tell you.
I don't know if he's going to listen to this, but I hope he does. Ross, where you at, my man? He'll get it if you know, you know. We'll just leave it at that.
Is he a space nerd? Okay. So we joke about weather balloons and UFOs, but like we really do launch weather balloons. NASA has several scientific balloon facilities around the country, and some balloons, they're basically like beach ball sized helium balloons, like almost like what you'd see at a party, with some stuff dangling from them. Some weather balloons are big. I mean, really big, like the size of a football field. And they're really bright because they're made of like silvery material, like mylar type material. And so they reflect a lot of light. We had one going over my training range in New Mexico, right? And I was responsible for that airspace, and it spooked us. We were like, what the hell is that? And we thought it was, some spy satellite or something watching us. And it freaked us out enough that we called air traffic control over it. We're like, hey, are you guys tracking something? Are you talking to them? And they're like, yeah, no, we don't know what the hell that is. So we did some digging and we figured out that NASA launched one from Fort Sumner, which is just down the road from us. And this thing was flying at 100,000 feet. And the only reason we knew was like a lot of Googling was how we figured out what it was. Some balloons are also weird shapes, like all kinds of crazy shapes, and they will tend to tumble in the air. If you get a chance, Google Tetroon sometime. That's Tetroon. That's a tetrahedron balloon. It's shaped like a pyramid upside down, kind of. And of course, there was the Chinese SPICE, high altitude surveillance balloon. What you need to know about it is basically it was a whole ass SPICE satellite, like an actual full up big SPICE satellite just hung underneath a balloon. It was crazy. And it had some propulsion fans so that it could kind of steer and maneuver. So that's wild. I suspect they're probably not going to launch a whole lot more over us because that was a little bit embarrassing. But, you never know.
Well,
another
the question
one
is, how many times have they done that before they got caught?
That's a good question. So, another one is lasers. Lasers account for a lot of the weird sightings in the last several years. One of the things about lasers, you don't always see the beam. It's not always like the movie where you see like the lightsaber beam. Sometimes it's just the spot. And that spot can be all kinds of shapes and all kinds of colors. And a laser spot can move in ways airplanes can't. It can move very quickly from very high to very low, to very left to very right, right? It can go turn off, turn on. It's silent. So a lot of the things that, like a weird light in the sky that you can't explain, that doesn't make any sound, sometimes it's a laser. Hobbyists have lasers. Scientists have lasers. You can bet the military has lasers. And also some assholes have lasers. People shine lasers at airplanes and helicopters and stuff. There are laser observatories around the U.S., often at universities, that shoot visible lasers into the sky to study lasers and the sky and clouds and stars and the moon, whatever. So that's a big chunk of it. Drones, and we're gonna get into drones as we go, but you can buy a quadcopter drone from Best Buy or Target or Amazon. Drones are all over the place, from the battlefields of Syria and Ukraine to utility companies that inspect pipelines with them and power lines. Sometimes realtors have them, sometimes cops have them. You might have heard about Brink drones. They do have lighting requirements, and sometimes the operators follow those lighting requirements.
Sometimes.
So we'll get into drones a little bit later, but that is a thing, and that does account for some of the things we're seeing in the sky. Another one that you may not be as familiar with is flares. Military airplanes drop flares to confuse heat-seeking missiles, and they do it in training. They do it for practice. It's important to know what it sounds like and what it looks like, and what it does to your night vision goggles when you pop them. So an airplane flying over might pop some flares. Those flares tend to burn out very quickly, but they can look wild, especially if you're not expecting them. Just, ooh, the sky kind of lit up. There's a different type of flare, and you might see them in the Southwest, called an aerial illumination flare. So typically you'd see this around a military training range, or sometimes out over the ocean. They can be shot from a cannon, or they can be dropped from an aircraft, and it's a flare that hangs underneath a parachute. And it can burn for sometimes several minutes, especially if there's a decent updraft. Kind of produces its own updraft because of the heat. So it kind of floats. And it's real bright, and it's real quiet, and it's real eerie. So sometimes like a big bright light in the sky that just kind of disappears might be a flare, especially if you're anywhere near a military training environment. So if you're into that kind of thing and you're trying to sort out like what's really what in the sky, there are two apps that I think are worth getting. And this is not a sponsored thing. This is just me personally, what I use to help rule out the normal stuff. One is called FlightAware and one is called SkyGuide. FlightAware uses flight data through the ADS-B system that displays most planes and helicopters. It doesn't show everything, but it shows most aircraft. If it's an airliner or local civil flight, almost always you're going to see it. SkyGuide shows you all the stars, all the planets, all the constellations, all the rocket launches, all the satellites, and all the space junk. One time when I was in New Mexico, I was sitting in my hot tub, and I saw a weird light floating across the sky. I'm like, oh, I wonder what that is. And I held SkyGuide up to the sky, And it's like, oh, that's a piece of a Russian rocket that's been orbiting for the last 3 years.
The other day I saw an article that some space trash landed in someone's yard in Florida.
Could have killed them. Yeah. It was like legit.
Yeah, it was fairly good size. I mean,
yeah.
Pretty wild if you think about it.
Yeah. So
pretty unidentified, I would say, when it falls through your roof or some shit.
Yeah. At that point, I really want to identify it because I'm going to sue somebody, right? So, yeah, FlightAware and SkyGuide, if you're trying to rule out the mundane stuff, like those are pretty good starts. So what I want you to take from all of that is just because it's unidentified to you doesn't mean it's space aliens. But that also doesn't mean it's friendly. In fact, you're going to see more and more hostile stuff in the air because it is pretty easy, simple, and cheap for hostile people to put stuff in the air. That also means you probably don't get to ignore it. Like, 20, 30, 50 years ago, if you saw weird lights in the sky, we could shrug and be like, aliens. Or at most, okay, well, maybe it's some secret spy plane the government's making. But if you look at Ukraine, Gaza, the Middle East, Iran, whatever, there are thousands of drones of all shapes and sizes, from little quadcopters the size of a Frisbee to Bayraktars the size of a Cessna. They're being used to spy, to direct forces and fires, to shoot, to harass, and to overwhelm defenses. Even here in the States, we've seen hobby drones interfere with major airports, smash into airplanes and helicopters, and spy on people. It is a matter of when, not if, we're going to see a major attack perpetrated by an unmanned aerial system here in the U.S. It's going to happen. It is too cheap and too easy not to happen. So what can we do about it? Oh, dang, got serious. We're not just talking about aliens anymore.
We went practical and tactical.
Yep. So, like all things, it starts with risk analysis. How likely, how severe. You probably don't need to worry about protecting your house or your backyard from drones most of the time. Certainly, if someone's watching you, if it's loitering over your backyard, you might want to do something about it. You might be surprised how hard it is to do something, though. But if you're responsible for safety or security at like a major event or a critical facility, then I think you need to put a lot of time and attention on this. If you're running a big sports venue or an airport or a power plant or a big holiday parade or gathering, then your probability and severity of dealing with hostile aerial phenomenon goes way up. I also want you to consider the variety of drone types. Like most people, when they think of like a drone, they either picture like a Predator Reaper drone, like the U.S. military would use, or they picture like a little quadcopter, like the size of a Frisbee, the DJI quadcopter you get at Target. And that's pretty easy to disregard.
There's even, I remember when I was a kid, one of my neighbors did like the RC planes, like remote controlled planes that he would build. And some of them were fucking big. And they looked like miniature airplanes.
Yeah.
And again, it's a hobby thing. It's not, this guy was making them in his garage. This was early 90s that I remember him doing this. So those have gotten, I'm sure, a lot more sophisticated in terms of like cameras and capabilities.
Much more capable, much easier, cheaper, like with 3D printing, like those components. Like you don't have to be a super expert hobbyist nerd.
To snap one of those together, yeah.
Snap them together, right? So like I said, it all just got easier, cheaper, simpler. And that's the thing that scares me about it, right? So, you picture the little like quadcopters, like what you get on Amazon or whatever. That's cool. That's easy to disregard. But I want you to picture that same quadcopter on steroids. Maybe it's got 8 rotor blades and maybe it can carry 100 pounds of payload. Well, what are those 100 pounds? What is that payload? Thank God most criminals are just, opportunists. They're using that 100 pounds to move 100 kilos. Yeah, a little conversion there. Probably not going to work.
Yeah, that's the math ain't mathin' on that one, Jim.
Yep. And so some of them have crashed, like true story, because they messed up the math. But most criminals they're just trying to move contraband, really, like across a border or into a prison, stuff like that. Like we're seeing that quite a bit. But it's a matter of time before some a-hole puts 100 pounds of aerosolized fentanyl in one and sprays it. It's a matter of time before it's 100 pounds of plastic explosives with screws embedded in it. Maybe that's 100 pounds of lighter fluid to set fire to something. I also want you to picture that fixed-wing drone, that RC airplane, but on steroids, right? Moving at you at 115 miles an hour. Or instead of one of them, I want you to picture 6 of them coming at you. Like seriously, like last week, the week before we recorded this episode, Iran shot 100 drones at Israel in one night. They are mass producing this stuff. And if they're mass producing it, you can imagine like it probably ain't that hard. So this problem set is one of those things that's kind of easy to back burner, right? Like if you work at county sheriff's office, municipal police department, security at some event or venue, you are probably understaffed. You're probably already overwhelmed by the daily drama, right? The meth heads, carjackers, domestic violence cases, organized retail theft. And here I am being like, oh, aliens. And also you need to worry about this like unicorn threat, this magical, mystical, like, oh, someone might drone attack you.
That's the thing, right?
What I'm telling you is like, it's not a unicorn anymore.
Right.
And it's hardly even a zebra. As of like this year, I'd say it's not even that weird. And in some amount of time, and I don't know how long, a week, a month, a year, I don't know. Anyone who claims they know is lying. You're going to see domestic criminal use of weaponized drones. And that's the UFOs I really, really want you to watch for. That's the lights in the sky. I need you to be like, oh, dang, we need to do something about this. Okay? It is tempting, really tempting, to just shrug and be like, well, I got this here shotgun, and think you've like checked the box for drone defense. Oh, we got some shotguns in the department. We can handle it. Bullshit. Not so fast. Okay? First off, you would be amazed how bad shotguns work against drones. Amazed. I was, because I helped test them. I used to do tests, as it happens, on counter-drone options. That was one of the things I did when I was doing advanced program testing. And it was stunning how bad of an option it was. It's not like killing a duck. Drones don't fly the same way ducks do. They don't react to pain the same way ducks do. Picture like a human versus like a Terminator, right? It doesn't feel, it doesn't react to pain. All it knows is gyro stability.
Data.
Right?
Yeah.
Data. It doesn't react to damage the same way. The idea that the idea of using shotguns against drones, that's up there with like wasp spray for personal defense or tampons for hemorrhage control. Like you just need to like chalk that up with all the other dumb ideas that we've had in the tactical world. Okay. Now that said, there are conditions where shooting at an attack drone with small arms might make some sense. Like if that's what you got, it's what you got. But consider, will that be effective? Have you ever tried it? If not, maybe you should. And also, where will those bullets land? Like one of the reasons we use shotguns against birds is because bird shot doesn't go all that far. Well, when you put your patrol rifle up, how far is that bullet going to go? And as any cop will tell you, you're responsible for every one of those bullets you put out of your gun, right? So how's this going to work? I'm aware personally, and I'm not the big data gatherer on this, but anecdotally, I'm aware of like 2 total cases where small arms worked against attack drones. One of those cases involved a shotgun. If you're aware of more, please let us know. Well, but as far as I know, like that's it.
I can double your stat there, Jim. We had a guy shoot down 2 of our drones like a month ago.
Oh, nice.
It was in his hallway, but
yeah, if it's indoor, that's a different game, right? Yeah.
He's in his hallway. We deconstructed that house for him after that. So
That's good. Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, I'm not counting like throwing a towel on it.
Oh no, he shot him down, and I'm pretty sure one of them was a shotgun.
And that's one of the problems. Like
Attempts to negotiate have failed.
Yeah, if the thing is in a hover and it's 5 feet in front of your face, yeah, you can probably shoot it down. But the problem is they are almost never like that, right? In fact, the big problem here is reaction times and OODA loops. You know, it wouldn't be us if we didn't talk about OODA loops. Can you see it? Can you identify it as hostile? Can you get your countermeasures up, whatever it is, and effectively engage before that drone executes its operational act on you? Can you get it before it gets you? And this is one of those like 21-foot rule problems on steroids. Okay. What even is its operational act? What is that drone trying to do? Is it trying to take pictures of you? Is it trying to spray you with Axe body spray or put some chemical on you? Is it trying to crash into you? Is it trying to drop a bomb on you? Is it trying to jam your radios? How close does it have to get to you in order to do those things? And how much time do you think it needs to do that operational act? I'll give you a hint. It probably takes less time for it to do its thing than it takes for you to get the shotgun out of your car. That's the problem here. Like you got like step one is understand the problem. The problem here is reaction time.
Noticing.
Yeah. So I need you to look up.
You're always going to be reactive. This is something where the other side has initiative.
Yeah.
And that's difficult to begin with. But then you add this whole element of it's in the sky. And how much time and attention are you putting up there?
Faux show. Now, you might have seen some cool tech out there that can counter this, right? There's some cool drone jammer ray guns. Some of them are really promising. Some of them are very cool. But without getting too specific about individual makes and models, I need you to know that certain jammer ray guns only work on certain drones. If you're jamming a guidance signal that relies on the drone being guided by a signal, not all drones are. If you're jamming GPS or GLONASS, you're jamming everything that uses GPS. And your friends at the FAA and the FCC might want to talk to you about that. Like, that's a pretty big deal to jam the GPS signal.
And just like the guidance signal, not a lot of drones don't need or require GPS to fly.
Yeah, so I want you to picture like collateral damage and stuff. Like, yeah, you crashed the drone, but you also crashed the 737 landing at Phoenix. And you're like, whoops. Dust pop. Okay. So, yeah, those ray guns, oh, by the way, are also very expensive. And they almost always live in like a big old padded Pelican case. And usually with a padlock on it. So, like, you see this drone coming at you 100 miles an hour, you're going to open up your trunk, you're going to open up the Pelican case, you're going to forget the combo. Hang on, guys.
Time out.
Yeah, the combo, 6969, whatever it is. You open up the case,
yet.
Get this thing out. They got to get the battery in. You got to punch in your pin, whatever it is. Like, it takes time to get it out, get it up, get it working, right?
So to speak.
Oh, by the way, you're not really allowed to just shoot drones most of the time. And this is really hard for people to understand. A lawfully operated drone has a lawful right to exist in the airspace. In fact, it's like a federal crime to shoot at one. Most of the time. So how do you know it's hostile? Well, if it isn't following the basic FAA rules, that's probably a clue. And there are some FAA rules that probably everyone should know.
And going back to knowing that it's hostile and being reactive is it could follow all the rules right up until it's time to not, right?
Yep.
You can operate it well and be in the green otherwise, and then suddenly you start doing the thing.
Ambiguity. Yep.
The most common thing, Jim kind of mentioned this earlier, about like drones like flying over, you know, your neighbor's yard or your yard, or looking in your windows, just like the neighbor with the drone that's being creepy and looking in the window to watch the girl in the shower or whatever. Like Jim is saying, the thing about the airspace and FAA rules is that drone over your house is no different than the 737 at 30,000 feet, right? It's in the air. It's not on your property. It has a right
to be there.
Yes. And yes, that is understandably frustrating and annoying and gross that your creepy neighbor can be watching outside your window, but it is not illegal most of the time. Most of the time. So I've heard of people like getting real spooked and grossed out and seeing these things. You know, they're pissed because it was watching their wife or girlfriend do whatever in the bedroom and this and that. And so like they go out and they shoot the thing, or they shoot at the thing. We've gotten calls for that sort of stuff. And I hate to be the guy to tell you this, but yeah, you can't do that, dude. Like Jim said, that's a federal crime, and you're the one in hot water, not them, right? Yeah, you might be pissed, like rightfully so, but you can't do that. So maybe get curtains. That's what I would tell you.
I like curtains. Also, like, you might not be able to defeat the drone, but maybe you can defeat the operator. Like that. Go back to our episode about getting a restraining order, and you keep the operator more than a line of sight away from you. That might be your course of action, but just messing with the drone may not get you anything. So speaking of like the FAA rules, some just basic, the way drones are supposed to be operated within the U.S., some things you should kind of know. Drones are supposed to stay under 400 feet. They have to get authorization and coordination before they fly in controlled airspace, like around an airport. Okay. They've got to fly within line of sight of the operator. The observer's got to be able to see the drone at all times, which means usually if you can see the drone, you can probably spot the person controlling it most of the time.
Yeah, you can get waivers for that, but most people are not going that far out of their way for it.
The drone, generally speaking, has to weigh less than 55 pounds. And one of the reasons for that is we don't want them to have a giant payload full of whatever, right? Or kilos or whatever. The drone has to give way to manned aircraft, right? So if it looks like it's trying to intercept an aircraft, if it looks like it's trying to get in the way of a plane, like that's a good sign that's probably up to no good. You're specifically not allowed to fly the drone recklessly or carelessly. And those are kind of catch-alls, right? And that's one of the beauties of a catch-all is it helps us get those guys who are up to no good. Commercial operators have to work with a LAANC program. So they have to kind of tell the FAA before they fly where they're going to be, what radius they're going to be there, and basically comply with what they said they were going to do. It's a low altitude authorization and notification capability. They're not supposed to fly over people or cars. They're not supposed to fly over 100 miles per hour. They're not supposed to come close to clouds, 200 feet horizontally, 500 feet vertically from clouds. They're supposed to be operated visually, right? And they're not supposed to be flown from a moving vehicle unless you're in a very sparsely populated area. So those are just some basic like guidelines that help you catch like, hey, this is not some realtor's drone. This is not being run by the TV station that's trying to get good footage of the scene. This thing is trying to cause trouble, right?
Yeah, the interesting thing about this though is that a lot of those rules, where they are written, is where it applies to commercial use. And so, like Jim is saying, the news station, the real estate purpose, those are all commercial uses. And so the Part 107 commercial drone operating stuff is where most of that stuff exists. There's actually a lot of leeway when it comes to people who are flying for hobbies or recreational purposes. So they have, in a lot of ways, a lot less restrictions. There are other things that get in the way when it comes to some of those airspace things, especially with a drone that is aware of where it's at. It could be locked down. But if someone is just messing around, they might just be doing that. They could be some hobbyist that doesn't know any better and doesn't have a lot of rules really imposed on them, that's literally just fucking around and doesn't know any better. And the thing about it that's a little bit sketchy is the enforcement on that sort of thing, even the commercial stuff, is basically zero. It's not much of a thing. Most of the time, the complaints about drone stuff go to the local cops. Someone calls 911. Hey, there's this thing. The cops probably don't know the rules themselves because if they're not Part 107 operators and they don't know the rules, it's not in their wheelhouse. And they, even if they know the rules, they don't really have like a legal remedy. Like, I can't charge. I'm not the FAA, right? Like, and I'm probably not going to have much luck calling the FAA at like 9 p.m. on a weekend to be like, hey, can you come?
Good luck.
Yeah.
Let me tell you about working with the FAA. Good luck.
Federal rules apply. They ain't working. So even if I did get a hold of them, they're probably not going to come out or do any follow-up most of the time. So the enforcement on this is really, really low. And so even the people that know the rules often don't follow them. And like I said, the weird hobby recreational user thing, people will screw around with these things all the time. And they legitimately just don't know any better until someone calls them on it. But when someone calls them on it, they're just kind of like, hey, like, can you stop looking in your neighbor's window?
Yeah.
That's it.
So when I'm trying to figure out, is this friend or foe, or is this like not just a jerk, but like hostile, like trying to hurt me? Consider, is it flying over a crowd? If it's flying over a crowd of people without a whole lot of coordination and authorization,
the stakes and the risk go up.
Yep. Or it's over an airport or over a sensitive facility. Like, that's your first big red flag clue. That's, hey, stop what we're doing. Let's figure this thing out. Okay. If you cannot see the operator, that is also a clue. Most competent licensed commercial drone operators wear like an obnoxiously obvious reflective vest, and they're very clearly marked, and so it usually says like, I'm a drone operator, don't talk to me, I'm busy flying a drone, right? Like,
they're very proud.
But also because they get screwed with, because they get threatened a lot and deal with cops a lot, and a lot of them take their job legitimately seriously. Like, hey, if I crash this thing and it crashes into a house, that's my problem, right? So usually they'll be very obvious. Some other things, the countermeasures. I mentioned there's the jammer ray guns. There are all kinds of jammers. I have seen nets. In fact, nets you could shoot of various flavors. I have seen defensive drones, like you launch a drone to go attack the other drone. Some groups have toyed with using hawks or falcons. I saw a briefing once. They briefed a general. They showed this trained falcon that could go after a drone. I'm like, dude, I don't trust most security guys with like a dog, let alone like $100,000 bird, but that's cool. It's cool.
It is fucking cool.
It's like, go find the YouTube videos. Like, it's cool. I feel bad for the bird, but it's cool. I have seen full up surface to air missiles set up just to take down drones. There are lots of hardware options, but I have yet to see a cure-all for the drone threat. And that's one of the things that kind of scares me about it, right? In fact, far from it. We've got lots of little band-aids, but we don't have like a fix. So as we work through this problem set, I want you to think about people, ideas, and hardware, right? If you are working a big event or a big facility, do you have some people who are tasked with this threat? Someone who's not just looking at the crowd, someone who is looking up. And that may not feel like a good use of your resources, but consider if I'm running the Super Bowl, gosh, someone should probably know something about the sky above the Super Bowl. And yeah, there's F-16s and flight restrictions and stuff, but what about the air right above the stadium? Do I control it? And do I have the right people on this? It's great that you put Snuffy in charge of this problem set, but this is maybe not a Snuffy problem set. This is maybe one of those trickier ones, right? And when we talk about air defense, we should probably have like someone who understands air defense. Now the ideas. Do you have a risk analysis that's specific to your venue and your situation and isn't current as of this year? Because the drone situation changed from last year and the year before that. Okay. Do you have some procedures in place to detect and sort and engage a hostile drone? What's your plan? Do you have it written down somewhere? Have you practiced it? Does everyone know what the friendly drones look like? More than once at military bases, we got very excited about our own drones. Whoops. Okay. But does everyone know the drones that are supposed to be there? Does everyone know that there's a drone that's supposed to be there? That might be worth briefing. Hey, this is the friendly situation, right? Do you have some sort of use of force, rules of engagement arrangement for at what point you actually do engage the drone? Like at what point are you going to send bullets at it? Because that's a pretty serious risk situation, right? Like I said, you take your patrol rifle, you start aiming it up into the air. How far is that bullet going to go? Even if you hit the thing. By the way, even if you successfully engage it, what's it going to land on?
Well, and can you prove that it isn't allowed to be there? I mean, that hostile intent at some point has to be pretty clear, because it could be some looky-loo or the media or,
Yeah. And by the way, by that time that you've proven it, it may have done its operational act. Like, this is a tough problem set.
Yeah.
That's why we're talking about it. This is tough. Okay. Who are you going to call to elevate this to if you're dealing with a drone? You're going to call the feds? Okay, cool. Which feds? The FBI, the FAA, the military? Like, do you have a phone number for them? Or are you just like, oh yeah, we'll call the feds? Like, you probably need to get more specific than that. And you probably need to exercise this with them. If you have a partner who's responsible for air, go ahead and practice that. Do you have some sort of a shelter or bunker that you can scramble to if there's a bunch of these things coming in? That might sound crazy, like, oh, we're going to have a bunker? Like, well, maybe. If you're overseas, like, that is a real thing that we would really do, right? How much warning are you going to have? There are times where maybe you do get some warning. Maybe you get no warning, right? And then finally, there's the hardware. Okay, well, maybe that is a shotgun. Okay, cool. What are you going to load it with? How are you going to stage it? Is it going to sit in a case inside your car? Is it going to be like locked up in the little long gun holder in your car? Are you going to have it out
in a closet? Probably.
Yeah. Is it sitting in a closet? Is it sitting in the back of the SWAT van?
Yeah.
Or are you going to have a guy out with it, like, looking like he's about to hunt ducks?
You got one job, bud.
Yeah. Sit here in this duck blind. Okay. So how are you going to stage it? Okay, well, maybe you got one of those cool jammer ray guns. Your department dropped $5 million to get you a ray gun. Okay, cool. Same questions for it. Okay, maybe you're guarding a particularly sensitive site, one of them big fancy sites. Okay, well, then maybe you need to get one of the more advanced, elaborate, like a full-up integrated air defense system, an IADS. Kind of your own little SAM site. That might sound crazy, but if I'm running in like a very sensitive national site, like maybe I do want something like that. That's pretty wild, but it's also real, right? That's 2024, 2025, 2026. Like, this is only going to get worse. So we probably need to dedicate some brain bites to it now.
And the hard thing is, there are so many... There's that stigma of, like, do you want to be the guy that screams aliens? And you have to recognize that, like, the more likely, reasonable answer is actually a lot scarier, right? Like, counterterrorism stuff, foreign adversaries, those things are random wacko, like domestic terrorists. I mean, there are really, really good reasons to be paying attention to that sort of thing. And it's not the micro, like the very slim possible. No, there's very plausible explanations for why you might see something like this happen.
On October 7th, 2023, some number, I don't know what the total was, some number of Hamas fighters attacked Israel in one of the biggest terrorist attacks in recent memory, using paragliders, right? Motorized gliders, parachute gliders. And they were able to get over the defenses and over the walls and over all the cool, fancy, high-tech stuff with a parachute and a fan strapped to their back. That is an air defense problem, right? One of the ways they defeated the Israeli defenses was with drones. Okay. So what I want you to take from this, in addition to aliens and, hey, the UFO problem actually might be real and we might need to get smart about how we handle our learning about it. I want you to notice things in the sky. I want you to report suspicious things in the sky to competent authorities. And if they don't listen, I want you to do something about it. I want you to keep bugging until you get resolution. If you see someone shining a laser at airplanes, first off, that person's an a-hole.
That happens like Jim said, all the time, all the time.
All the time.
It happens here to our helicopter,
yep.
the county's aircraft. It happens all the time.
Yep. If you see someone flying a drone over a military base or next to a military base, or on the approach corridor of an airport, I want you to call the cops. Like, this is no joke. Like, that might really be dangerous and it might really get someone hurt. If the cops don't listen, call the FAA. If you do see some unexplained aerial phenomenon, what I want you to do is take a picture of it, like a good picture, not with a potato, whatever cameras I've been seeing pictures with it. I want you to take the best picture you can, record it, get a video of it. I want you to record when and where you saw it. And I want you to work through that list of mundane possibilities. Look through the list of things that it could be. If it isn't an airliner, if it isn't the planet Venus, if it isn't Starlink, if it isn't a SpaceX launch, if it isn't a jet fighter doing a low-level route, if it isn't a research balloon, if it isn't the local university shooting a laser into space, if it isn't just a funny-shaped cloud, you might be seeing something that a lot of people are very interested in, and it might be a threat to us. It might be a really, really big threat to us. So maybe you should tell someone about it. And
call an adult.
Yeah. I need a grown-up right now. Yeah. Okay. And I don't know what the hell it is.
Sir, I need to speak to your manager.
Yeah. What I do know is I've been flying around a lot and I've seen weird stuff in the sky. And despite whatever background I have, whatever things that I've worked on, I've seen stuff I can't explain. So it's out there. Truth is out there. Let's find it. As for the drone thing, hey, this is real and it's coming and it's already here. And it's easy enough. It's cheap enough. It's simple enough. You're going to see it weaponized. You're going to see it used against you. That's not a someday thing. That's a someday real dang soon thing. The whole world saw the attack in Israel on October 7th. The whole world saw what worked and what didn't. Drones worked. The whole world has watched Ukraine. Drones work.
So, yeah, and they're everywhere.
Yeah, so keep an eye on the sky, and if your solution is I got a shotgun, you're an idiot. So let's do better.
Best of luck, though, bud. You're going to do great.
Yeah, it's better than nothing, but it's all basically nothing. So it starts with having a plan. Do some analysis, do something to mitigate it, figure out hey, if you're high threat, no, really, we need to do something about it. Mostly it starts with people, have the right people watching that problem set, and build some procedures. What are we going to do about it? And then practice those procedures. If your plan's a shotgun, okay, cool. Test it. prove that it works, and test it against like a drone that's actually trying to get you.
And let us know when it doesn't work and you could try something else.
Yeah. So I dedicate this episode to Chief Warrant Officer Garrett Illerbrunn, who on Christmas 2023 was mangled by a one-way attack drone when he was in Iraq. Dude's an Apache pilot from the Fort Liberty greater area in North Carolina. And Christmas Day, some Iranian-aligned asshole decided to shoot a one-way attack drone at Americans. And, this shit's real. So let's keep an eye on the sky and let's do something about it. That's all I got.
Get after it. All right, guys, that's all we got for tonight. This episode is brought to you by Drip Drop. Drip Drop Oral Rehydration Solution is an electrolyte powder that you mix with water. It was formulated by a doctor for quick absorption. I work in the desert, and it only takes a few hours in the heat, wearing body armor, carrying around a bunch of gear before I start feeling like crap and fall behind the curve in dehydration. Drip Drop keeps you in the fight so you can finish the mission and rehab for the next one. Go get you some at dripdrop.com or on Amazon, or ask your supply guy to find it for you. This episode is also brought to you by 09 Holsters. We talk a lot about people, ideas, and hardware on this show, so when we invest in equipment, we always think in terms of experience first. 09 is helping you figure out how to carry the gear you need to be effective. They are built by cops, for cops, with a minimalist design and bomb-proof durability. Radio cases, flashlights, body cameras, even canine remotes, you name it, 09 has been filling a void in tactical duty holsters for more than a decade. Go see what they offer at 09 Holsters, that's ZERO, the number 9, holsters.com. 09, built to win the fight. Don't forget that we put out new episodes on the 1st and the 15th of every month. If you like what we're doing, you can have our Patreon, give us $1 for each new episode. That money's going to go back into bringing you good content. If you want to interact with us, you could find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We are at TacTangents. You can also email info@tacticaltangents.com. And one last thing, our Facebook discussion group. We've got a little group going on Facebook. If you go to the groups tab on our page, you can join it. We've got more followers on our page than we have in the group. So I know there's some of you out there following the Facebook page that are on Facebook that are not in the group. Lots of like-minded people in there. So come hang out with us. All right. That's all we got. Good talk.